Hello everybody, it is Christmas Eve. I do hope that you're all ready for tomorrow and that you're sat there with a glass of mulled wine and a mince pie, just relaxing and indulging in your passion for landscape photography before the big day. So let's get on with it, shall we? This morning I've come to Otterbield Bay on Derwent Water, and I'm here for two reasons. The first reason is to correct a mistake that I made when I was here last year. The second reason is so that I can mention that I'm running a workshop here at the end of January, and if you're interested in attending, you'll find the details on my website. So if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you may remember that I came here to Otterbield in about October last year, and I had a very successful shoot. In last week's video, I mentioned that I'd done a lot of work to put some new images into my shop, and that only one shot made it from 2018, and that shot was taken here, and that was a shot of Otterbield Island. But the main shot here, the shot that I always think of when I come here, is of this gnarly old tree that's sticking out of this rock. And when I was here last time, I made a really big mistake. This is the shot from that visit back in October 2018, and I like it. It's a nice shot. I like the subtle lighting, I like the composition, but there is one major flaw with this composition, and that is that the camera was too high. And what that means is that the tree actually cuts into Blencathra, which is in the background. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have separation between your foreground and background elements so they don't overlap, if at all possible. So that was a mistake that I made, and a lot of people picked that up. So today I've come back to rectify that mistake. So let's talk about this first shot. I'll start with the composition. So what I've done is I've set the camera up lower than I would usually, and that means that I'm no longer getting the overlap between the tree and the mountain Blencathra in the background. I've got the tree on the upper right hand third, and then I'm just using the rest of the space so that you can see actually Skiddaw in the distance and part of Otterbield Bay. It's going to be quite a complicated exposure. I'm quite shaded here, and that means that my foreground and these rocks here on the right hand side are in quite dark shadow, and then I have a very bright sky. So I'm doing some bracketed exposures which I will blend together in Lightroom as an HDR blend. Now I have put on my polarizer, which I'm using to manage some of the contrast and darken the sky a little bit, and then I've also got my 3-stop hard edge grad turned upside down so that I'm using that as a normal 3-stop graduated filter, and that's because it's quite windy here today and there's no reflection, so I want to try and smooth out that water a little bit. Now my base exposure is 1 second, but I've decided to overexpose by 1 stop, and so that means my middle exposure is 2 seconds, and then I'm bracketing 2 stops either side, and so my short exposure is going to be ½ a second, and my long exposure is going to be 8 seconds. Now what I don't like about this scene today is we have blue sky and we've got clouds, and when you're doing long exposures, what will happen is that those clouds will streak across the sky, and I personally don't like that. So what I'll do when I'm finished taking my bracketed exposures is I will remove my ND filter and take an exposure specifically for the sky, and that way I've then got the option to blend that in afterwards so that I don't have those streaky clouds. The other thing that I should mention, the other little complication with this shot, is that we also have some trees on the right hand side, and those branches cut into the side of the frame. Now in order to get the branch positioned correctly, there is nothing I can do about that. Those branches are going to be in the shot, so my only option is to take them out using Photoshop. The light has gone very flat now, and that means I need to change my approach. Now, I'm not going to change my composition on this occasion. What I'm going to do is start thinking in black and white, and that means a moody black and white long exposure. So what I've done is I've taken out that inverted 3-stop hard edge grad and replaced it with a Lee Big Stopper, which is a 10-stop ND filter, and at the moment I'm doing exposures of about 4 minutes. Now, the wind has picked up a little bit, and that is moving the branches of the tree slightly, so I'm not utterly convinced that this shot is actually going to work. I should also mention the dynamic range. I've still got a problem with the dynamic range. On the right hand side, the rocks are very dark, and then we have a very bright sky. I'm not too worried about the streaks this time, because we're going to convert to black and white and it's going to be a much longer exposure. I'm not too worried about the clouds streaking across the sky. But I am worried about that dark foreground. And what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to try to recover about 2 stops in the shadows. Now, my camera should just about be able to manage that without it being too noisy. And the other thing that helps with the noise is because it is quite textured, the noise isn't too much of a problem. If it were a kind of flat surface, the noise would be a lot more obvious. Now, one of the things that other people have picked up about my images, they've said that they need better light. And I think that's good advice. But I think it's also a bit more of a traditional landscaper's approach. What I mean by that is that my business is very much based on helping other people to get the shot. And that means coming out in all conditions and working with the conditions and trying to get as good a shot as you possibly can. And so that's what I try to practice. And the black and white long exposure is a bit of a trick in the bag. One of the other shots that works really well here on the western edge of Derwent Water are the jetties. So if you come south from Otterbield, where we were earlier, you come to a jetty. Now I can't remember what it's called. It's either Upper or Lower Brandle Howe. And I stopped there and I just took a very, very simple shot. A classic composition looking down the jetty, nothing much to it. Out of nowhere, the wind's really picked up. It was really windy when I was down at the jetty. And so what I've done is I've come round a little bit further to this small bay, just a little bit further south. And there are some trees here, and that's creating a little bit of shelter. And I'm just going to finish off today with one final shot. I've had an email in, and this email is a bit of a request, so I'm going to read it to you now. It says, "Dear Chris, I've been following your channel for a long time now. In fact, I've been following your journey right from the very start. I think you're brilliant. I love your photography, but I used to really love it when you used to take selfies. I'm writing to you to ask you if you would do a special selfie just for me. Merry Christmas." And that's signed Mrs. H. Sale. Well, Mrs. H. Sale, as it's Christmas, your wish is my command. So that's it from me for today. All that's left for me to do is, on behalf of me and Mrs. Sale, to wish you all a very, very happy Christmas, and I'll see you again before the new year.